do live.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Free Assange Vigil. This is week 76. 76 weeks in a row of us bringing you all of the latest news updates, and that's probably me. Dang it. Anywho, my name's Steve Boykin, and I am joined by my co-hosts Andrew Smith and Kendra Christian. Our guest today is the former UK ambassador to Syria, Peter Ford, whom we've spoken of in relation to the BBC4 smear series that they've put together on people who have talked honestly about what's going on in Syria. So I can't wait to get into that conversation. But first, let me run through the numbers real quick. Today marks 3,661 days of illegal and arbitrary detention for Julian Assange, 616 days since the WikiLeaks founder was trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy after being sold to the United Kingdom for a $4.2 billion IMF loan. 16 days remain until District Judge Vanessa Baraitser, concierge to the U.S. State Department, reads her decision. That'll happen on 4th January. Action for Assange will be in Washington, D.C., holding events to mark that occasion. Thanks to the wonderful donors and the people who watch the vigil, we have hit our fundraising goal. You guys are incredible, and we can't thank you enough. 1,285 days of federal incarceration for whistleblower reality winner. On the plus side, today marks 272 days of freedom for Chelsea Manning, who is streaming regularly on Twitch. That's Twitch TV /XY Chelsea 87. And Jeremy Hammond has been in a halfway house for 32 days. We sincerely hope that Jeremy can achieve full freedom, or at least whatever measure of freedom the United States government is going to give him. A halfway house isn't it, but it's not prison. So we're certainly glad that he is out of prison. With that, I'll kick it over to my co-host. How you doing this morning, Kendra?
I'm doing all right this morning, Steve. Really excited for our guest today. How are you, Andrew?
Good. I'm actually just really excited, looking forward to January. We've gotten a lot of people involved, and hopefully we'll have a really good turnout outside the British Embassy on January 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
So, Peter, Vanessa Beeley is a friend of mine, and she told me that she's known you for a number of years, and that you refer to her as the Foreign Office brat, which just made my day. And she does watch the vigils. So if you'd like to call her the Foreign Office brat on the internet, that would be lovely. Say hi to her.
Vanessa is wonderful. She is a true heroine. She's very effective and has incredible integrity. I think it's a testament to how effective she's been that the BBC are attacking her in that series that you mentioned earlier. It's a tribute. She should feel honored.
You know what? She is kind of wearing it as a badge of honor, but at the same time, it's so malicious and so out of pocket what the BBC put together for that. I didn't watch, or rather listen to the entire series, just because I don't go in for self-punishment that much anymore. Were you contacted by Chloe? Did she send you like a hostile email like she did Vanessa and Eva? Were you able to get any kind of response back from them?
They've been extremely evasive with me, and pushed me onto the official complaints department, which it turns out is outsourced to a company whose official name is Capita, but we know them as Crapita. with the entirely the result you might expect, that I haven't heard anything further. But I will not let my complaint drop.
Can we talk a little bit about your time in Syria? What Syria looked like pre Western, I don't know, destruction, I guess, mayhem, carnage, chaos, greed, and you were ambassador until 2006. Am I correct on that?
That's right. I was lucky enough to be there during what some called the Damascus Spring. This was when Bashar Assad was still basking in the approval of the Western powers. And in fact, just a month before I arrived in Damascus as ambassador, he had been having tea in Buckingham Palace, would you believe, with Her Majesty the Queen. This has now been glossed over, but this is the same Bashar al-Assad that we're now obliged to demonize. But when I was there, most of the time relations were cordial. Things got worse over our invasion of Iraq and the blowback into Syria from that, and the fact that the US, if not the other Western powers, was determined to make sure that it was going to be Assad's head on the plate after Saddam's. That was where it all began to go wrong. But I've been a regular visitor back to Damascus since I left in 2006. I only moved a few miles down the road to Jordan, where I worked for a UN refugee agency for 8 years.
So could you talk a little bit about the impact of the WikiLeaks releases in Syrian society? Because there was a lot that had come out through Cablegate and other releases that showed, and specifically the Syrian files, that showed the level of US intelligence manipulation of social media platforms in Syria, and kind of trying to throw fuel and set a spark to the flames there.
That's absolutely right. There's credible evidence that the US had a cell up there in northern Jordan, near the Syrian border, from which they were more or less directing opposition across the border in southern Syria, where it all kicked off in 2011. And if it wasn't a pre-planned operation, it certainly looked like it. The early use of agent provocateur to fire into the crowd, this was what really kicked things off. And within days, the popular protests, the authentic popular protests had morphed into armed insurrection. It looked, and almost certainly was, pre-planned, and everything that's followed over the last 10 years. We're marking the 10th anniversary of the Arab Spring and the beginning of the Syrian conflict just about now. And it's not an anniversary anyone wants to celebrate.
I'm wondering that, when you were, if you could describe, did you go through some sort of change from the time, when you were the ambassador to afterwards and now, and seeing the propaganda? And I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, when I was ambassador, most of the time things were relatively cordial. And the European countries, at least, were trying to bring Syria over onto like their side of the bed and wean Syria away from its previous dependence on Russia. And things were going quite swimmingly. Bashar al-Assad had been invited to London and Paris, but the Syrians, not unreasonably, asked to see, as it were, the color of our money for us to make some concessions on trade. But we wouldn't. Why? Because we consulted Washington. Washington would not allow the Europeans to warm up relations with Syria. This was an incredible missed opportunity, which will go down in the annals. And I remember a particular Syrian minister saying to me, "Why are you pushing us into the arms of the Iranians?" Because the Iranians were hovering around in the background telling the Syrians, well, the West is turning its back on you, but we're ready to help. And this minister said, "Why don't you give me some ammunition? Why are you forcing us into the hands of the Iranians, who, frankly, we don't really like? They're not Arab, for one thing. They're Persians. Most of Syrians are, the majority are Sunni, not Shia. The Shia are different anyway from Assad's subsect of Alawites, and they wear beards, and we're secular. So why are you pushing us at these Islamists? You're leaving us with no choice." But we continued to turn our back, and with obvious results.
So some of Vanessa Beeley's work that was smeared through this program that the BBC put out was exposing the human trafficking, the organ harvesting, and the other crimes that could loosely or directly be attributed to the White Helmets and the U.S. coalition efforts in Syria. Could you talk a little bit about those situations that were happening over there, and the smears that have been placed on yourself as well as her and others for standing up for basic things like stopping human trafficking?
Well, the White Helmets have been the how can I describe it? The centerpiece of the Western PSYOPs strategy. Their role has been to supply a sort of smoking gun that was lacking in Iraq. You remember that we had the Iraq WMD fiasco. There never was any smoking gun. The US, I think, drew the conclusion from that fiasco that next time round that we use this chemical weapons caper, we'll get somebody to pretend to be treating the victims of a WMD or chemical attack. And that was the role, and continues to be the potential role of the White Helmets, to produce staged incidents, people foaming at the mouth, literally, the whole fakery of it. Their role has been absolutely pivotal in that. And I believe that is why the British government must have prompted the BBC to produce this recent series of radio programs trying to whitewash the White Helmets' reputation after the death in disgrace of their British intelligence operative founder. They went to huge lengths to try to rewrite the history of the White Helmets, to whitewash the White Helmets. Now, what other nefarious activities the White Helmets got up to, I'm not the best person to ask. But Vanessa has documented these charges in considerable and convincing detail. I bow to her knowledge of that particular aspect of the situation.
I'm wondering if you think that, you know, I mean, obviously what's happening to Julian Assange is, you know, important world round. And I'm just wondering if you see, you know, sort of the effect of how well they've been able to, you know, squash this. I think we are breaking through quite a bit now, but how much that you think that could have had to do with, you know, them like really just going after Vanessa Beeley, another honest journalist that we have out there?
Yeah, it's all one ball of wax. It's striking how it's the same cast of characters, on both sides, with the case of Assange, anti-imperialism activism generally, and Syria in specifically. It also happens that on the other side, it's always the same characters, the establishment, more the liberal establishment, I have to say, with which I traditionally identified, but from which I'm increasingly disenchanted. The Guardian newspaper, New York Times, the whole liberal establishment, which has moved even further to the right than many who were on the right. This is the funny thing. They're imperialists by the back door, often under the humanitarian or human rights pretexts. But ultimately, it's bearing the white man's burden in dismal places like Syria, where the natives can't be left alone to run their own affairs.
So I brought this up on the Vigil a few times before, but I want to get your opinion on it. John Pilger, legendary filmmaker and journalist, wrote about meeting Leni Riefenstahl in the 70s, who produced Hitler's propaganda films. And he asked her a series of questions about why the propaganda was effective and what made it work. And part of her answer was that it depended largely on the liberal intelligentsia class in Germany to make it effective, because it was the liberal intelligentsia that determined what questions were allowable and what questions were no longer permissible, and what questions in fact became a form of treason. And I really feel like there's a significant amount of overlap between that line of thinking and what we've been witnessing in the last 10 to 15 years, if not every single day in a post 9/11 society. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that sort of framing.
Yeah, I take your point absolutely there. In the last 10 to 15 years, I think there's been a massive shift to the right. The whole political center of gravity has shifted. You might attribute it in part to the collapse of communism, the dissolution of the Soviet Union, also perhaps the impact of the internet and social media working its way through. Whatever the reason, it's very noticeable that the whole terms of political debate have shifted rightwards. And you see this in the contrast, for example, between the way Julian has been treated and how the people, the whistleblowers and the publishers at the time of the Pentagon Papers were treated. The two situations are very close parallels. We're talking about caches of secret documents being brought to public attention. We're talking about potential breaches of national security, and yet the treatment of the whistleblowers could hardly be different. it shows the distance traveled. Admittedly, not in just 15 years, it's been a longer time span. But I think the parallels are there, and something deeply troubling has happened between the time of Pentagon Papers, when newspapers like The Guardian published, as they did the WikiLeaks, even just since the time of the WikiLeaks dump, first big dumping, even just in the last 10 years, you see the change of scenery, if not the guard.
I'm not incredibly familiar with your like story arc, but I do know that recently you've become much more active in the Assange community writ large. Can you talk about that for a little bit? Like, what made you decide to come on board? What made you decide to lend your voice and considerable experience to the Assange movement?
Yeah. Well, I have been sympathetic, privately sympathetic from the get-go. I thought Julian was Man of the Year back when, and I've been indignant about his treatment for a long time. I did speak about a year ago at a public event in London on his behalf, but it's true, I haven't been hyperactive, because I've been hyperactive on other things, mainly campaigning about Syria. But just recently, I've been drawn in, partly simply through the influence of friends, but also a growing sense of burning injustice as the court case makes its way through the British courts. It's dawned on me the enormity of the horror that we as a society are carrying through on Julian, and I just want to help in a small way. I feel duty bound.
We're at a fairly critical point. I mean, every moment in this political persecution of a journalist and publisher has been critical, but we're hitting kind of an apex now with the decision in the broad daylight kidnapping and extraordinary rendition of Julian Assange on January 4th. From way back here in California, just watching through a screen, it looks like there's been an increase in public support in the UK. Like Kendra said, we're starting to build a little, it's noticeable now, even in like circles here in the US.
Mhm.
But the one thing that we've always stressed is that this is a post-partisan issue. There's no team here other than we're on the side of the proliferation of accurate information. What I'm wondering though is because you've been part of the diplomatic corps, is there a way that you would suggest to bring it not sort of disparate groups together who already support this issue but may not know how to communicate with each other very well?
Not off the bat, I'm afraid.
Sweet. Cool, because I didn't want to feel like an idiot, and I'm really trying.
Give me a moment and I'll think of a strategy, though. At least now we have the tools, though. I mean, this year we've all discovered video conferencing and Zoom, etc. So we're beginning to acquire the tools, and doesn't that frighten the establishment, by the way? I mean, I'm not going to say thanks to COVID, but it's noticeable that this last year we've seen how powerful social media can be. While at the same time, the pandemic has distracted from other important issues. Who knows how it will play out in the long term, but I'm also an activist on the anti-lockdown front. And the overlap, oh, fantastic.
Yes,
You,
page there.
you have to tread carefully in this territory. You can lose friends quite easily. But I do notice an overlap. It's generally the same personnel who campaign for Julian and who are interested in Syria and who campaign over the overreaction to the corona. What links these three causes? Well, one simply is having an inquiring mind and not being conformist. So simple as that, I think. And it's noticeable how on the other side, it's the same crew. It's the same crew every time, the conformists, the establishment, the people who want to preach to us. And in a way, I sense that maybe support for Julian in Britain anyway has increased partly because of some rubbing off of the activism and the street marches that we've had. There have been quite a few Assange posters being carried during our anti-COVID marches, and I've been in quite a few. I'm missing one today, but anyway, I'm doing my bit here and now.
I at least for me, from my perspective, this relates to the end of the foreword to Cypherpunks, where Julian wrote, our task is to secure self-determination where we can, to hold back the coming dystopia where we cannot, and if all else fails, to accelerate its self-destruction. And there's significant overlap, as you said, between the people who are pushing back against lockdowns, the people who would like to see the Syrian people achieve self-determination, the people who would like to see, you know, people in general achieve self-determination and agency. And I fear, and I kind of know, that we're past the point of pushing back against the coming dystopia, and that now we need to focus on the acceleration of its self-destruction. But I can be talked down off that ledge. Maybe.
Well, we're getting in the deep here, but I must say,
What we do here, sir.
On the level of personal participation in activism, the appetite grows with participation. And I've had a tremendous amount of fun, and I felt incredibly inspired just by being with ordinary human beings on marches and identifying common causes. Even some people that many would consider a bit Looney Tunes, I'd regard them as the stormtroopers of the movement. Every movement needs its avant-garde, its skirmishers. I literally embrace them. And by the way, on our marches, a set feature is a hug. So I literally embrace them all.
I think I know for myself, after, I became active when Assange was arrested. You know, the whole attempted smear campaign to make him look scruffy and all of that had the complete opposite effect on me. And it was like a wake up of, oh, wow, this is happening, and this whole year has been just sort of repeated with that, but I've definitely come to some of your same conclusions, because as well, also, I mean, it's a pretty clear path to find the truth when you just can go to conspiracy theories, because that's where it's all hiding. And then, you know, to start to meet a lot of different people, and also, you know, that weighs on, it's really a heavy thing, I think, with the, you know, the propaganda, the constant repetition of things. A lot of that is it's very abusive, I think, on the human mind. And I think, you know, people really do the best they can with that and are pretty amazing that are standing up against it. And, you know, it makes, one thing that we were talking about in DC is that it, you know, it serves to try to make people who are really social, you know, asocial, because they have to stand outside, when really what they want is this community. And, you know, to your point with the lockdowns and different things like that, I think that one thing that has always been beneficial to me learning from Assange is that the censorship is just really a sign of weakness. So I try to remember that, because sometimes it feels so heavy, but that's true. And we see that happening more and more. So you know, there's times that I wonder, like, how many people, you know, that there might be quite a few more people who maybe aren't out yet, but that do see that something's up. There's a difference between, you know, wanting certain things politically, I'm seeing, and then people like now not even being able to ask a question. I wonder what you think about that happening.
Yeah, I find the camaraderie amazing. It's so inspiring to be among normal people. The sense of common purpose. Even when you know that you're a very broad front and people come at this from different angles, and you wouldn't always in normal circumstances agree with them, but we're united in 2 or 3 common causes. We think our differences, we're very tolerant of each other. On marches in which I've participated here in the UK, we've had white nationalists alongside black activists, for example. It's been actually quite touching. It gets you in the heart to see people collaborating on a very important and deep, sacred cause of freedom. Mm-hmm. And freedom ultimately is what it's about, and not being dictated to what to wear, what to think.
I couldn't agree with that more. I couldn't. I think what the powers that be, however you want to describe these cretins, I usually go with demons, but you know, we'll walk around that for the moment. I think one of the things they fear the most is exactly what you just described, like a black activist standing next to a white nationalist united for a common cause. And I think that if we can legitimately present that unification, that there is a significant opportunity to work outside and around the propaganda that we're under. And I think it's necessary for all activists, regardless of what it is you are activated over, to immediately reach out to people you wouldn't ordinarily talk to make yourself uncomfortable. Because I personally believe that real, significant, enduring, lasting change never comes from a place of comfort. I don't see it possible. So it's incumbent, in my opinion, that activists move as far outside of their comfort bubble as humanly possible. And I was wondering if that is a decent approach, if not necessarily a sane one.
Yeah, I think so. What strikes me is that left and right are meaningless terms now today. There's no more left and right. There's them and us, or up and down. Up, the establishment urinating down on us, and we, the ordinary people. No more left and right. Here in the UK, there is virtually no difference now between any of the main parties, the Conservatives, the Labour, Liberal. There is no choice. There is no choice. We're becoming more like the United States in that. It's Tweedledum or Tweedledee. There was a brief flickering of the left when Jeremy Corbyn, you may have heard of him, the until recent leader of the Labour Party. It was like a last hurrah of the authentic left. Interestingly, he was a supporter of our cause on Syria. But his political demise signaled the end of this brief flicker. And now there's no more left and right. There's just up and down, them and us.
The smear campaign that Jeremy Corbyn was handed, the way that he was pushed by members of his own party to walk away from all of the things that got him the leadership role in the first place, and then to have him cave to that establishment, walk away from Brexit, backtrack on a number of other issues, and turn around and sort of embrace I don't know, the Lib Dem or right-leaning labor positions. For that, he was rewarded with some of the most harsh anti-Semitism smears that you could possibly get. And the similar thing happened to Bernie Sanders here, where every time he caved to the establishment, they would heap new accusations or cast new aspersions against him. And at what point do people start to realize that if you're working within a framework designed by sociopaths, or at least currently occupied by sociopaths, at what point do people recognize, like, this is how you're going to be treated every single time you say something remotely sane? You know, you say something remotely on the side of the people. I get incredibly frustrated with the fact that nearly 100% of the adult population worldwide knows that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And yet, within political frameworks, we somehow think that there's an exception to that rule. It's maddening. I didn't really have a question. I just had to get that off my chest.
Well, I think you do see that with the left and the right, because it's just I mean, and I don't know, for me too, just from Assange supporters on, that I follow on Twitter and things like that, mainly in the UK and Australia, I do see that left and the right, and you see that just pitted against one another. It's it's the left's fault that nothing's going right. It's the right's fault that nothing's going right. And then everybody agrees on us losing all of our rights. That seems to be, everyone's pretty lockstep in that. And I know for us, just trying to run a post-partisan group, it's been very difficult to, it's just with the propaganda, it seems to introduce these, underlying principles that just people accept as like reality that make absolutely no sense. Like how we could even be talking about, what's going on in Syria and why that would be, so much our business there and things like that. And I'm just wondering, do you think, what do you see for the future here? Do you think that do you see that increasing in the UK, like more and more people waking up, and are these protests getting bigger? And it's just always so hard to get information. So
it's very hard to answer that question. Even in normal times, people aren't honest when they answer opinion polls. I mean, we know that there were a lot of shy Trump supporters, and there were a lot of shy Brexit supporters. Similarly, I suspect there are a lot of shy anti lockdown supporters and shy pro-Julian supporters. But that's just a subjective feeling I have and based on some anecdotal evidence, people I talk to, and I give them just a little bit of encouragement, they come out in support of our positions. But I'm certainly not optimistic about this producing real change. But hey, these are unprecedented times. These are potentially revolutionary times. The whole paradigm of social behavior. I mean, it's a bit like Maoist China. Our governments are behaving in a more extreme way than even Mao ever dared, or ISIS. At least ISIS allowed the men to go with their heads uncovered. But in our society, we've gone the full Mao.
mm-hmm.
That's a kind of a scary way to describe it, almost, that you look at these populations of supposedly totalitarian nations, which a lot of them are, and a lot of them are absolutely horrible. But then you look at the US and you have people literally not being able to allow to participate in society if they don't curtail to the correct Santa Claus story of COVID-19 and masks and all of this. And it's something that I was amazed to see the government have the power to just shut everybody's businesses down here in the US. And it's ushered in a whole new terrible level of legislation across the world, to where you now have the UK having a spy cop law, to where almost every branch and every department within the United Kingdom's police, military, intelligence, health and human services, the environmental, the food regulators, they're allowed to commit murder, rape, and torture free of charge because of the new law that just passed in the UK. And in this age of coronavirus, where we have a former military bunker, I believe it's in or just outside of London, that's housing people 30 per room, you've literally set the ground stage with this law and these things for like mass human experimentation right in downtown London, essentially. So I was wondering if you could talk about your thoughts on this heinous UK crime bill.
Yeah, we're definitely being subjected to military psyops operation. And in fact, we know the name of the unit, Brigade 77 of British military intelligence is guiding, directing many of the government's propaganda efforts. And we have an arm of government chillingly known as the biosecurity unit, which has succeeded the anti-terrorism unit as the scarer in chief. Now, that is really scary. And we can only try to increase awareness of this, as you folks are doing, but I'm afraid the sheep are not picking up the signals very well. We have to shout louder.
I mean, it may come down to disseminating information in a way that people who aren't used to hearing information that doesn't confirm their biases, it may come down to that, but I don't know how to put it in a 30-minute pointless sitcom. I don't know how to put it in a meaningless romantic comedy, or we spend a lot of time trying to find solutions to these problems and these gaps in communication. So these vigils themselves sort of act as like a brainstorming session from time to time. It strikes me that the best way to reach people is in person to person communication, and part of this lockdown strategy that we're all under is to separate us and to make us to remove the physical space element from society. It's not necessarily as easy to communicate vital information across the Zoom meeting. We also don't recommend Zoom. I mean, you're just letting however many corporations and governments into your computer when you do that. Is why we're using this particular platform, because it doesn't do that. But I don't know, what is it? I mean, this is for everybody and for the chat too. Like, how do you communicate to people that are hardwired to ignore everything that doesn't come from their comfort bubble sources?
You know, I had a thought while you were talking, and it was
people normally drift off when I talk, Kendra. That's perfectly normal.
No. About what you were talking about. But I was just thinking that one of the most important things that I have learned since Assange's arrest is that my opinion doesn't really matter to anybody, nor has it ever. You know, it was insane to me to see, like, just even thinking that I was somewhat awake, how much I wasn't, you know, how many other like premises I thought were there. Do you know what I mean? Just things that weren't even really realistic. So it was, I mean, I used to be, you know, so afraid on Twitter to like copy a photo and send it out. I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's just the truth. And so I don't know. I mean, that's one thought I had, is maybe if we can convince more people, like, hey, that's great, but nobody cares. You know, you got to do something. You got to go stand up, or you got to, you know what I mean? Like, be active. I don't know if maybe we could have a campaign around how nobody's, you know.
Well, the way I think we can do it is you got to put people on the hook, right? And this sounds kind of weird, so just follow along with me for a second. The U.S. prosecution argued in court that disseminating any type of classified material, whether it's already been released for public consumption or not, is against the law. That is why Julian is being prosecuted, is because he shared classified information. So I think a way that we do it is we get people to share classified information. We put it on the internet, and if they retweet it, bam, they're in violation of the Espionage Act. And you just put a warning that says, by retweeting this information, you will be in violation of the Espionage Act of 1917, US Code, blah, blah, blah. WikiLeaks exposed that Khalid al-Masri was tortured, raped, kidnapped, and shipped to the salt pits in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
You put the link and a picture of it. Everyone who likes and retweets it understands in a consensual way, like, hey, I'm violating the Espionage Act. I am sharing this classified information. And I think that's how you get people, because no one ever thinks that a tweet will get them put into jail until they realize that this tweet is exposing rape and torture.
Well, but also really, they're the ones who are violating the Espionage Act because they're using it to abridge our free press. You know?
Absolutely.
But anyway, yes, I see your point. One thing, Mr. Ford, that we did when we were in, to Andrew's point, when we were in DC in February in front of the DOJ, is Andrew read Eugene Debs's statement. Didn't you read that? Wasn't that in front of the DOJ, Andrew?
Yeah, I read Eugene Debs's statement. He was one of the first people prosecuted under the Espionage Act for opposing World War I. So I got to violate the Espionage Act in front of the Department of Justice, and apparently they don't care unless you have an international platform, which is something else that they said in
Or if
the
you're speaking in front of a recruitment office or in front of a bunch of, or, you know, a conscription sign up like Debs was. Because it was the fact that he was directly telling people not to join the military, that they didn't have to join the military or to leave the military. That was the excuse that the U.S. government used to prosecute him under both the Espionage Act and the Sedition Act. And the only reason that he got out was because the heaviest number of years that he was given was under the Sedition Act. So when it was repealed, that's effectively what got him out of prison, not necessarily that they had changed their mind about the use of the Espionage Act. It's a just pretty convoluted ball of string with that whole case. And again, I mean, we're using 100-year-old law that was only created for the sole purpose that it would be weaponized politically to curb certain types of speech. And the fact that this thing still exists, the fact that Julian Assange can be hit with 17 separate charges under this 100-plus-year-old law that only exists to politically persecute individuals. Like there's got to be a come to Jesus moment where people go, that could be me. I have shared an article that shared classified information. I have received an email about an article that shared classified information. That could be enough, according to the U.S. government in open court during the second week of Julian's hearing. It's insane to me that manners trump rights in the post 9/11 world, that civility or tone has more of bears more weight on a conversation than actual information. It's like more than it's up versus down or them versus us. Like we're fully in the upside down at this point, where when you've got, you know, a publisher being held in a maximum security prison on remand, no less, in a prison that is filled with people who have this virus, where they're deliberately putting inmates who tested positive for COVID in Julian's wing, knowing he has a chronic lung condition, knowing that he's in poor health, hearing about the testimony that came out in the third week about his mental state. Like, if that's not a government weaponizing a virus, weaponizing information, and weaponizing their own justice system against an individual for political purposes, I don't know what the fuck is. And we've got to be able to communicate that in a concise way. Like, remove my rambling and make it sound pretty.
But no, you're absolutely justified. As a former consumer of intelligence spying product myself, I can see the hypocrisy of what they're doing a little better than many. It's an occupational hazard for spies and their agents that they're going to have their identities revealed one day. They should look after their secrets better, that's all. And, you know, many of these people whom have been claimed to be put in danger, and I think I'm right in saying that absolutely no proof has been provided that any of them have actually suffered in any way. It's such transparent bad faith, and a former insider like myself can see that very clearly. It's very specious. This protecting sources nonsense is just that, nonsense, a pretext. a smoke screen. But it's a kind of religious area. National security can never be properly examined because it's like examining religious dogma. It's taken on trust, and it needs, frankly, more people like me to speak up.
That was actually one of the things I was, just starting to realize when you look at the representatives sometimes and the things that they say, and it just makes me wonder that, they're probably more secluded from the truth, possibly even than the American public. And I'm just that's interesting to hear you say that, because I mean, so much is relied upon, from our intelligence agencies, and it's been interesting to wake up to realize that's all the wars we've been lied into, and I mean everything like that it just sort of originates there, and we have really as a public no control over that. We don't elect any of those people. We don't we elect our representatives, but I know in the US, I mean, I can just say that, like, even this opportunity to have this conversation with you means so much, because there are so few people, leaders out there who we need. I'm no expert, but I know what free press is. I understand the principle, and it's definitely grateful. And I do wish that more, I hope that courage just continues to be more contagious with people.
Yeah.
What's fascinating to me, real quick, to build on Kendra's point, is that as reliant as the public has become on intelligence sources, the actual evidence provided by intelligence sources at the same time has decreased, diminished, and disappeared. So it really is it's become a supernatural belief system. It's become a faith-based belief system that unnamed sources providing no tangible evidence are correct, rather than being able to view the material even after it's been, partially redacted to protect some things. Like we have to go through a freedom of information request process. Yeah. We've got to go through litigation. We've got to pony up hundreds of thousands of dollars, or in Stefania Maruzzi's case, euros. By the way, Stefania Maruzzi has a GoFundMe up. She's trying to get her.
No, she made her goal.
Oh, she did? Excellent. Okay. Yeah. I told you I woke up like hella late this morning and I barely made it.
No, she did it like super fast, and she sent a thing out because she's awesome. Please stop. I made my goal. I'll let you know if I need more. And that's why it's just, I really, under the worst circumstances possible, have met some of the most amazing people in the world.
Let me let you into a sort of state secret here. And bear in mind that I used to receive a lot of secret material when I was in Syria. And 90%, I would say a good 90% of the material is useless, or worse than useless, very often misleading, and designed to mislead by the providers of the intelligence. And I never felt better informed than after I left my ambassadorship and joined the UN down the road in Jordan, where I only received open source material. And I honestly felt better informed about what was going on in the Middle East on the basis of that material than ever I did sitting in my ambassador's chair with my privileged intelligence dossier. Because so much intelligence is from flawed, tainted sources. A lot of it comes from other intelligence services who are always trying to manipulate you, or they're from paid sources who are telling you what you want to hear, or they're from malcontents who just want you to stick it to their enemy. It's no wonder that over 90% of human intelligence is pretty useless, and often worse than useless, as we saw in the case of Iraq with the misleading HUMINT about WMD. And when you have aerial surveillance, that even then interpretation of the data is extremely flawed. The whole security thing, it's like a religious cult. It really is. It's just dogma. And when you can see through it, the scales fall from your eyes. It should not be held up and worshipped the way it is. It should be called out for what it is, mostly baloney.
Mm-hmm.
So in the book, The World According to U.S. Empire, it's about Cablegate and the disclosures thereof. Julian's foreword in that book actually talks about the religiosity, the religiousness, whatever the right word is, of the U.S. State Department and how it operates, and how when WikiLeaks information comes out, there's a joint campaign telling the public, you can't read this, and then a separate joint campaign inside of the State Department telling the people that they say are allowed to read this information not to. Because essentially the hierarchical tiers of priesthood that they call the classification system and the people that are then allowed to access is extremely compartmentalized. During your time as ambassador, was there any point where you were instructed against reading WikiLeaks, or even at your time in the UN?
I'm not sure I've understood the question. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
Was there ever a point in time during your stay as ambassador for the UK and Syria that you had received any direction to ignore or just disregard information released by WikiLeaks?
No, I don't think so. I often received instructions to make representations to the Syrian government about, for example, infiltration of jihadi elements from Syria into Iraq, where they were joining the insurgents there to make trouble for the occupying forces. And I would faithfully carry out my instructions. I would make those representations, but then I would send back a signal explaining why the Syrians might want to do that, given that Washington was advertising that they were next for the chop. Assad with his head was on the block next once they finished with Saddam and Iraq. So it's a rational decision to try to delay that by allowing troublemakers to go across the border to slow down the US advance towards the Syrian border. But I wasn't thanked for my signals, but that's another story.
I know here that when we, even after the 2016 DNC leaks, which I don't understand how anybody wouldn't be. I mean, it's this weird response to the truth that I see happening. If somebody is, when somebody is cheating me, it pisses me off. I want to know. And when I discover that, I want to do something about it. So it's weird, this like doubling down over that. But, we had here CNN, tell America that it's illegal to read WikiLeaks or something like that. Wasn't it Jim McCarthy? I can't remember exactly what it was, but
Chris Cuomo
okay.
said it is illegal for you to read WikiLeaks as a private American citizen. And then he said, trust CNN. Like, these are his words. Trust CNN to tell you what's in it. And people went, yeah, okay.
But that's, what though? That's exactly what we were talking about with this religious worship of the State Department. No, I'm safe, or I'm being kept safe. But I don't know, for me, I have the exact opposite of feeling safe when I hear about things like the Space Force. So,
I still think it's hilarious that they're calling the Space Force the Guardians. Like they're the Guardians of the Galaxy. I seriously wonder if Marvel is a part of the Defense Department now. I really do. Like, I mean, it's just there's a correlation between Hollywood and predictive programming in the U.S. military.
Mhm.
You know,
That's something that was actually exposed in the Sony leaks, like the deep level of infiltration into Hollywood by the intelligence communities.
yeah, and to Peter's earlier point about human intelligence being used as a personal weapon against one's enemies, the Guantanamo leaks, the Guantanamo files, it exposed that too, like just right there in black and white. Peter, did you ever wind up in a Cablegate document? Where
no,
was
I
your
don't
name
think
attached to any of that?
Cablegate. I don't think so. I didn't have that honor.
Okay, because that would be fun if there were, because there's what 250,000 diplomatic documents in that thing, and it would be I'm never at any point in my life am I going to have the time to sift through every single one of those, but it would be fun to occasionally come across like a sane line or two in a diplomatic cable that wasn't just, hey, here's how we're screwing over this guy or this country, or here's who's on our good list and here's who's on our shit list. And you know, I think that it would eventually, like, maybe when I actually get my patch of dirt in an undisclosed location and I can fish off of my deck, you know, maybe I'll have time to pour through 250,000 documents. But yeah, I'd love to come across like the sane ones, you know. That would be like a little treat. Peter, I don't know how much time you have. I do say, God, this has been
As long
wonderful.
as my battery lasts, I just got it on the charger now. It should be okay. But if I disappear, it's only because I've run out of juice.
Could we talk a little bit? Do we want to pull in some of the articles that we have? Because we wanted to talk briefly about the Guardian, as well as the UK lawmakers' request to meet with Julian. Can we pull those up?
Oh yeah, I mean, I talked to Deepa Driver the other day when this letter came out of MPs requesting an audience with Julian Assange about the potentiality of getting some of the UK groups to petition directly those members of Parliament to come stand with you guys when you're outside of Belmarsh and you're outside of Piccadilly. Is that something that you can pass along to like Allison and the rest of the gang there?
Yes, surely. I think it's a great initiative. We may even get some to agree. The cause has not yet been so totally demonized that some brave MPs can't be found. I think we should also invite some of the candidates for London Mayor. In fact, in that connection, there's a little glimmer of hope generally, because the upcoming May elections for mayors in the big cities of Britain offers a first chance in this COVIDian atmosphere to see something maybe a little bit different. There is at least one candidate for Mayor of London who comes from a Brexit background, a lieutenant of Nigel Farage. And you know, the whole Brexit thing shows that the paradigm can be broken. The establishment were entirely against Brexit, and yet by some miracle, some alchemy, Farage and a bunch of others managed to pull it off. Whatever you think about Brexit, for or against, I voted for, and then I got buyer's remorse. So I'm on both sides of that argument. But as a political achievement, it was remarkable and shows what can be done against all odds. And you might say that the victory of Trump and his near victory the second time is another illustration of that. The establishment them can be resisted.
I know, I would love to get your comments, because I know that's one thing that, I mean, we try everything. So we've really been pressuring Trump to pardon Assange. And I'm just wondering kind of what your thoughts are around that, and just even the what's, recently happened with the elections in the US, and what, from your perspective, what that looks like.
Yeah, well, again, we're walking a bit on eggs here. I was very disappointed, I must say, that Trump lost. I'm not a big Trump fan. He's been very bad for Syria, although, to be fair, he did try to pull the troops out of Syria repeatedly, but was thwarted by the establishment. But I was personally disappointed. I expect the incoming administration to be even worse, even more interventionist. I'm really not optimistic at all. But maybe Trump will be off stage, like the hidden imam. He'll go into occlusion, and he'll have his many followers waiting for him to reappear. But we're in a very fluid moment. I mean, on the world political stage, things could go in any of several directions. Very hard to predict.
Do you think that if Trump doesn't pardon Assange, that he's really even worth much to anybody? I mean, in that sense, like, because then with our free press gone, I really don't. What are we supposed to do then?
Yeah.
I mean, conversations like this. Yeah,
I must admit, I'm not sure I understand the legalities of pardon here. As a layman, I don't really see how you can be pardoned for an alleged crime on which you haven't even been put on trial. How can there be a pardon before there's an offense?
Well, it's
maybe under U.S. law there can.
It's a preemptive pardon.
Yeah.
So what it does is it pardons you ahead of facing any charges that you may have to stand in court for. So it essentially effectively cancels out your prosecution. They can still put you through the process, although most times they don't, because that preemptive pardon is sitting there for you. So it's a way of like chucking the consequences before you actually have to deal with the ones that come from prosecution. Doesn't do anything about the fact that you've been held as a political prisoner for 661 days. Doesn't do anything about the 3,661 days of illegal and arbitrary detention. There's no further recompense that comes from that. But you also don't spend 175 years in a supermax for publishing accurate information. What would be better, in my opinion, is to rescind charges, or in addition to a preemptive and enduring pardon, to rescind charges, drop charges, and close forever any active investigations into Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. But that's essentially what the preemptive pardon does, and that's what we've been pushing for.
Yeah, I imagine that Trump will be looking at it from the angle of what will be the most awkward legacy I can leave on Assange for my successor, and I'm not sure how that plays out. Would it be more awkward?
the rumor is that he may run in 2024, or someone close to him may run in 2024, and it would be significantly beneficial to whatever he wants his legacy to be if in fact there are plans for another presidential run to pardon Julian Assange, to pardon Edward Snowden, to change Chelsea Manning's commutation into a full pardon. However, the Trump administration does not have a fantastic record with whistleblowers. They've in fact prosecuted more whistleblowers in 4 years than Obama did in 8, which is horrifying. So, how much that actually has to do with President Trump and how much it has to do with the people that he brought into his cabinet, his administration, and his sphere of influence, I don't know. I can't speak to that. But it would be a significant boon to his legacy and or future career for him to do this. It's just Tucker Carlson's never going to have me on to say that because a long-haired freaking quasi-hippie with a beard. My secret weapon is being
Tucker had me on once and gave me a much more courteous treatment than the BBC ever did.
Wow. When was that?
Oh, about 3 years ago when Syria was really hot.
Mm-hmm.
And they had difficulty finding talking heads. My phone was ringing off the hook at that time. Yeah.
Oh, I bet. This is right after
I discovered
gas attack, then, huh?
Yeah, I quickly discovered that the only time you could ever really say what you thought was on live TV. If it was recorded, forget about it. It had to be live.
Well, and now we're seeing even live feeds get cut. Haven't there been a few different instances of that? I mean, it's like I can't think of the specific off the top of my head, but I know.
So there was a newly elected Congress critter named Jamal Bowman who was being interviewed on MSNBC, and he started telling a little bit too much truth about Rahm Emanuel, and they cut his live feed.
After being asked about Rahm Emanuel.
Huh?
They asked him a question about Rahm Emanuel. He started
to answer it, and they just cut him.
Wrong answer.
That's literally what it was. We have another example. Rand Paul said Erica Caramello Barr's name on the floor of the Senate, unrelated to the hearings on the Ukraine, but just as an investigative matter. And he was removed from that meeting in the Senate. He went on C-SPAN and read the same statement. YouTube removed a sitting congressperson's fucking part of C-SPAN because it violated YouTube's terms of service. And then it's to the point that a lot of content creators won't even talk about Erica Caramello Barr, because if you say his real name, which I don't even know at this point, like Eric Caramello, something
no,
like
that's not. But that's good because now this video won't get yanked.
Yeah, but anyways, so they'll censor the hell out of whatever the fuck they feel like at this point, even if it's coming out of the Senate. Like to the point that you look at Donald Trump's Twitter feed and every fucking post has a up, he might be lying, up, go look at CNN, up, go look at AP. Like, it's just gross.
Twitter flat out said they're going to remove any post that they deem to be harmful to the COVID narrative. Not harmful content, but harmful to the narrative. Like, they're not. The entire Predator class has, in the last couple of months, shown their entire ass to the world. Like there's some sort of collective sociopath OnlyFans, and we can all see it now. And it's up to us to decide whether or not that's someone's whole ass or if that's a fantastic looking robe. That was a reference to The Emperor Wears No Clothes if you're not paying attention. And not the Jack Herrera book about hemp, which is also excellent.
So I asked Bill Binney this when he was on Tuesday, and I would ask you too. What would you say to any like would-be whistleblowers, like people that have access to information that isn't generally known or disclosed to the public, that's thinking about coming forward because they're having a principled crisis about it? What would you say to those people that might be watching?
Get a good lawyer. Look before you leap. Have a word with me first. Summon up your courage. But I think it's just as important for people, not possessors of intelligence or information as such, but simply people who have an opinion, insiders who have an opinion. Like myself, I haven't, strictly speaking, I'm not a whistleblower, I'm a renegade. I'm off the reservation in expressing opinions based on expert knowledge. We need more people to come forward. There's another former colleague, Craig Murray, of mine. He's another great guy, had some success. We need more people in positions like that, former senior officials, to come forward and just challenge the narrative, if I may use the establishment word, to challenge the narrative. It's just as important as coming forward with privy information.
And they're trying to prosecute Craig Murray for this ridiculous notion of breadcrumbing, yet in their I guess deposition or whatever it is that they legal argy-bargy for, here are our charges, they cite his reporting not just in the Solomon affair but with Julian Assange as reasons for why he's dangerous, why he should be prosecuted. And so since Julian's been arrested illegally, since he was illegally dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy, the attacks on journalists have increased horrifically. Freedom of the Press Foundation came out with a report last week that per Reporters Without Borders International Press Freedom Tracker, the number of arrests and incidents of violence around journalists in the United States increased by 1,200% from 2019 to 2020. Now we have the case against Craig Murray. We've got the BBC smearing Eva Bartlett and Vanessa Beeley to the point to where there was a thinly veiled legal threat in an email to Vanessa from the segment producer of that series. They drag your name into it. Anyone who's spoken remotely out about the realities in Syria instead of the fantasy and fiction that people need to believe in order to continue a war. But it's not happening to cable news reporters yet, so it's not real yet. It's not happening to the BBC standbys yet, so it's not real yet. And I wonder, like, how do you make something that is already happened and is already happening? How do you make that real to people who don't see it? I don't know. I really does something I try to answer daily and wrestle with daily.
Yeah, and when you look at internet censorship as well, Facebook, Twitter have gone into overdrive over the COVID narrative. It's really scary. I mean, these are situations that we we violently opposed when it was the Soviet Union or China behaving this way. But, you know, it's like China's won. China imposed its model of how to respond to COVID, and we bought the whole system. Just the techniques of lockdown, but the ideology as well. It's the full Mao. We've gone the full Mao of state control down to the most intimate, secret, intimate family behaviors. The full Mao.
Well, and it's being romanticized as if that's what's, you know, that's what's necessary for us to keep our edge in the world, and our freedoms is to get rid of all of our freedoms and become, you know, just these commoditized creatures that have, I mean, what's the point? I mean, keeping us around, I guess, like maybe for egos. I don't know. It's a very strange situation here.
We have this like Mussolini style economic fascism coupled with the Maoist or Stalinist style state authoritarianism, and it's this, I don't know, supremely evil mixture of the worst of both. And yeah, as we move further towards automation, as we move further towards this like transhumanist agenda, as people like Peter Thiel and companies like Palantir take more control over health and human services worldwide, I sincerely hope that I believe that people already know that something is wrong. They might not know how to put their finger on it exactly. The victims of what has been wrong are people who have been demonized, like Julian Assange. They're people who can be easily smeared, not credibly, but easily, you know, like Craig Murray has been. But I think that the next several months, I mean, people are going to be able to put their finger on what's wrong, or at least on a good part of it, because with Kamala Harris administration, and let's be honest, that's what it would be, is promising accelerationism in terms of more lockdown, less civil liberties, less ability to travel freely, restrictions on what information you're allowed to see or share, openly telling you we're going to put restrictions on what you're allowed to see and share on media.
For your own good.
Yeah, for your own
good. Because we care.
Yeah, because we know what's best for you. It's my body, my choice if it comes to abortion, but that's it. It. My body, my choice, that only applies in that one instance. It's so weird to me.
Yeah, and they try to culpabilize by saying, oh, your behavior is selfish, you're going to kill Granny. Any low blow is useful. And the mind control is happening in plain sight. In this country, the UK, we have something called the Behavioral Insights Unit. And these are the propaganda meisters, the people who come up with the slogans and all the manipulation. So and it's in plain sight, and nobody considers it a scandal.
Well, apparently you can pass things like the Spy Cops bill, or like, has ACTA 2 gone forward yet, or are they still debating that? But we're gonna have, I know that's an EU bill and it's not a UK bill now because the UK has pulled out, but I didn't know if you knew anything. I'm gonna be talking to
I'm unsighted on that
Netherlands tomorrow about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can pass things like, we reauthorize the freaking Patriot Act every 90 days in this country. And every 90 days, a handful of people go, hey, by the way, you know that thing sucks, right?
Yeah.
And the Democratic leadership and the Republican leadership, not necessarily the rank and file, but the leadership, are all 100% on board and continuing to support and continuing to make sure the existence of these overly draconian, monstrous invasions of privacy, basic human rights, basic civil liberties. It's mind blowing. It's mind blowing to me that you can hold up something like, oh, you're going to get granny sick as a reason for all of this.
Yeah. You bring up the parallels with terrorism, which are very pertinent. The way terrorism was exploited to take away our freedoms, and as an analyst of terrorism myself, what's striking is how little real damage the West has ever sustained at the hands of terrorists. It is so totally out of proportion to the reactions, the way we've waded into other countries far away from us, nominally to quell a bunch of terrorists. And yet we've been ready to work hand in glove with many of those same terrorists when it suited us for to overthrow Assad. We want to deploy the U.S. Air Force as the air wing of Al Qaeda to protect them up there in northern Syria. ISIS never represented a serious, any kind of existential threat to the West. They didn't even claim to. They just beheaded a few Westerners. They said some provocative things. Some of their individual followers carried out barbaric actions that just damaged relatively few people in the West. ISIS represented a danger literally 1,000 times greater to the people and the governments of Iraq and Syria than ever they did to the West. And this was ISIS in their domestic propaganda. ISIS were very clear that they do what it says on the tin. They are the Islamic State of Sham, that means Syria, and Iraq. That was their agenda, not to attack the West. That was incidental.
And yet we were told that they were a fundamental threat to our entire way of life.
Yeah.
And nobody really actually bothered to ask anyone from the organization about it. They would find these like cutouts and put them on camera, and that would complete the spin. That would complete the propaganda cycle, and that was it. Like it's so, and that's why having reporters on the ground in these places is so critical. Having reporters who come from the West, who are on the ground in these places, who are there independently, is critical, because the West is hardwired not to listen to brown voices. We should be. We should be listening, but we're hardwired not to. So as a critical part of the pathway to hearing those voices, we need liaisons, as it were, and that's why Eva's work is so fundamentally important, why Vanessa's is a handful of other people that do decent work out of there, and now we've got Richie Medhurst, who's half English, half Syrian, who grew up in the diplomatic corps, who can speak to both sides of the issue and disseminate the information fairly well that way too. It's a cartoon. We live in a cartoon.
One of the fascinating things to me still is that, when all of this kind of happened. I mean, I was in my early 20s, and I just, it's baffling to me how, as a college student, and at the time, how, with adults, that just even a war on terror is accepted. I mean, what is that? What does that mean? It's just it's an acceptance of a absolute absurdity.
We're getting the evildoers.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. And that's why I do think, I mean, with the WikiLeaks releases, that was so important, because those came at a time, when something like that had been, pulled over on a whole, maybe not a whole population, but a lot of people. And I don't know. I was wondering too, if you think, because I know we were talking about the AI and how big tech and everything, the censorship. I know that was one of the things that Julian Assange was really talking about before his internet was cut out. And I wonder, because I quite frankly have not been as involved with trying to learn what's going on all around me as I have been, recently, even in the past few years. And I wonder, do you feel, even, just from your point of view, that's all just has definitely increased, kind of in a correlation with what's happened with WikiLeaks and Assange? And I'm wondering if you think that's true or not, or what you think about that.
Yeah, I think you could make out an argument that the case of Julian point and WikiLeaks, it kind of brings the threads together. There is this the terrorism issue, the control of information issue, the rightward drift of society, and the fact that Julian's cause has been taken up by the same people who march against the extremes, restrict COVID, anti-COVID restrictions. As you were speaking, it struck me how close the parallels are between this pretext of terrorism and this pretext of COVID. In the case of terrorism, you stand a 99.999% chance of surviving it. With COVID, I think it's 99.997% of surviving it. Doesn't that tell us everything we need to know, really, about what's going on across the whole spectrum of state control, establishment control? It's all one ball of wax.
Well, I mean, clearly we have to entirely reorganize society and education and travel and work and the future over something with a 0.4% kill rate for the people who catch it. I mean, because otherwise we might realize that we're being victimized by a totalitarian state. Yeah. Our engineer, our tech ninja, Sleepy Josh, has to get out of here in about 10 minutes. So we're gonna go ahead and wind down. I did just get a message from Beely, Peter, and she says that she thinks you're you're amazing and you're an inspiration. So we were all wanting to see you blush on camera anyway. You may now pick on her.
Encomium at the beginning, where I was saying how great Vanessa is. She's really our prophetess. Every movement needs prophets and prophetesses. Here in England, we have Piers Corbyn is one of our leaders on the COVID thing. And he even looks like an Old Testament prophet. Even his props, his dress. I mean, these symbols are really powerful, and they're a major plus to a movement. Every movement needs its prophets and prophetesses, and its symbols. I mean, look at greenery with the teenage prophetess, Greta. And we have to work on these symbols, build them up more, take advantage of them. So, I mean, this is not the moment to launch into my theory of the importance of mythology in understanding contemporary society, but just to give you a little taster, one take on Trump is that he's the mythological Joker figure. I'm not the first person to point this out.
Like
He's the Joker, the Lord of Misrule, who turns everything on its head, sort of Pied Piper. And when you look at it through that optic, it explains quite a lot.
I have been told by somebody who has been very wise and a wonderful person in my life many times that I am missing out by not, knowing more about mythology. And just even from talking to this individual, one of the things that came into my mind is that even when you see all of the, people love the Marvel comics, they love these, these things like that. And I've always thought that's kind of people like sort of crying out for what they were missing, the bigger, meatier version.
Well, just Google Loki, Loki, the Norse god of misrule, the Joker deity, and it will ring a lot of bells.
I'm smiling because I've got a friend who goes by the name Benjamin Balderson, who is a walking encyclopedia of Norse mythology, and I have been inadvertently educated over the last several years, and now have like a couple of massive tomes on it that I've waded partially into. Before we start to get the stink eye from Josh, we're gonna go ahead and start to wrap up. I almost feel like it's cutting it short, but we actually went our regular amount of time. This has been a fantastic conversation, Peter. You are welcome back anytime. And I have another show called Slow News Day that I would very much like to have you on in the next like month or so, depending on your schedule. But let people know what's going on with the Assange movement. Let them know where they can find you guys at your events, and just thank you so much. I really do appreciate the time that you've chosen to spend with us.
I've really enjoyed being on the show. It's a pleasure to participate in a bit of intelligent conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'll start. I'll just say thank you, everybody. Thank you to Steve and Andrew and Josh and former Ambassador Peter Ford. What a complete honor. And thank you so much, for what we were talking about, for your bravery as a leader, speaking out and standing up. And I just can't tell you how much that means to me, because, when I am able to get somebody to read, I have something to show them that really that carries a lot more weight than what I might have to say. So I appreciate that. One thing to note, in Denver, we are going to be having events around the reading of the ruling. So we'll have an event in Boulder that Saturday, January 2nd, and then we will have one in Denver on January 3rd. And if you would like to follow us, that's at DNV Free JA. Thank you.
My name is Andrew Smith. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigmund, Zigmund. You can find us on Twitter at action_4Assange. You can also find our website, action4assange.com. We have tons of different call to actions, including the continuation of the one where we're requesting, or where we're contacting the U.S. Pardon Department, proliferating the Massey-Tulsi legislation about Snowden, the Espionage Act, and Assange to your local representatives, as well as tons and tons and tons of others, including the contact information for every single person inside of the Australian Parliament in support of Julian, as well as David McBride. So I just would like to thank Ambassador Ford for joining us. I would like to thank everybody for watching, and Sleepy Josh for hopping on to run the behind the scenes ones and twos for us.
My name's Steve Poikinen. I host a show called Slow News Day. You should be watching it on Rockfin, because that's where all of my content is going to be when YouTube arbitrarily removes my channel for accidentally telling too much truth. So please sign up and get your free account there. I do leave content up for free for at least a day or two, usually longer, because I suck at promoting and making money off of this. So normally I don't set it to premium until the next time I do a show. Please join me tomorrow. Original anonymous collective hacktivist, your Mark Lubers, will be joining me. That is going to be wild. So be there for that. My good friend Marcus Cage will be my afternoon guest at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. The Sunday morning show is 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I've got some really good stuff coming up, and I'm not even going to tell you guys about it yet. I'm not, but it's freaking awesome. To everyone in the chat, to everyone watching, we love you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you especially to all of the people that donated to the GoFundMe, helped us hit our fundraising goal. We did that earlier than we expected, and it's all because of you. You guys are tremendous, and thank you again so much. Thank you to my co-host, to former Ambassador Ford. This has been wonderful, sir. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. Sleepy Josh on the ones and twos, and we will see you Tuesday. Good luck to us all.